Now, I know this topic can be a bit controversial even among Second Amendment supporters, and trust me, I didn't always see it the way that I do now. Just to give you some quick context, I used to be okay with the idea that once convicted felons were released, their Second Amendment rights could be restricted for a period of time until they proved they could be trusted with firearms again. Now, of course, my views have changed a lot as I got older, gained more real life experience, and started working alongside all kinds of different people, that my perspective began to shift. And a lot of it wasn't until I began exercising my Second Amendment rights in the state of California that I realized just how easy it is for someone to become a felon. For example, if I carry my firearm that I legally purchased without first asking for permission, felony. If I want to give my legally purchased gun to my dad as a gift but didn't want to fill out any paperwork, felony. If I accidentally carry my firearm even as a licensed CCW holder into a gun-free zone like a school or post office, felony. Now, it wasn't just with gun laws that made me realize how easy it is to become a felon. It could be something as simple as writing a bad check or having 100 pounds of illegal fireworks laying around for 4th of July. Yup, felony. Now look, I was young and naive, and I thought getting hit with a felony meant that you did some of the worst stuff imaginable. I'm talking about like you murdered, raped, or kidnapped someone. But then you see things like the president get hit with 34 felony charges and start thinking, damn, who did he piss off? So yeah, having a felony doesn't automatically mean you committed a violent act against someone, which that's something I really didn't think about, which is why it made sense at the time to restrict felons from exercising their Second Amendment rights, at least until they could prove they could be trusted again. Now, a part of that also came from the idea of recidivism, which is when someone who's already been convicted of a crime ends up committing another crime after being released. Now, back in high school, I remember coming across a study that claimed that nearly 80% of released felons end up incarcerated again. And that statistic really stuck with me, but as I got older, I started realizing that those kinds of numbers depend a lot on where the data comes from and how it's gathered. For example, recidivism studies vary on how long they track someone. Some follow up to 3 years, others go as long as 10. And what they count as recidivism isn't always the same either. Some studies include things like violating probations, so it's not just people getting locked up for new crimes. Now, a big part of why my view shifted ultimately comes down to two main reasons. The first being my own work experience. When I first turned 18, I started working at a couple of warehouses where I met a wide range of people. Among those were some convicted felons. Now, I'll be honest, you can't really tell someone's a felon just by looking at them, especially nowadays with tattoos being more normalized. So there I was, just an 18-year-old clocking in, trying to get his money up, working side by side convicted felons. And it wasn't until they told me that I even knew. And of course, being young and curious, I asked what they did to get locked up. Some, it was because of multiple DUIs, others getting caught up hanging with the wrong crowd. Then there was those who fled from the police, and, some were just trying to make a quick buck slanging. Now, keep in mind, these guys were in their late 20s to early 30s. Some had wives and kids already, explaining to me how they were living with the consequences of choices they made when they were like 18 and 21. And I remember this one time we got into the conversation about self-defense, and I asked what kind of weapons they were actually allowed to own/carry legally. And they replied, legally, almost nothing. And they weren't lying. I looked it up. In California, felons aren't even allowed to own pepper spray. And I'll be honest, a few of them said, hey, I got a family and kids. And while they never got specific with models or calibers, they made it pretty clear that even though the state says that they don't have a right to own or carry a firearm for their own personal protection, that doesn't take away the responsibility that they have to protect the people they love. Now, I'm not saying all this so people can feel sorry for convicted felons or to suggest that people shouldn't be held accountable for their actions, because by the time you're 21, you're old enough to know better. You know that drunk driving is wrong. You know stealing, selling drugs, or running from the police isn't the smartest thing to do. And sure, we all made mistakes when we were young, but that doesn't mean you get a free pass. At the end of the day, if you commit a crime, you do the time. Meaning, yes, your rights will be taken away for a period while you serve your sentence. Now, where my beliefs have changed over time is what happens after that time is served. I believe if someone has paid their debt, learned from their mistakes, and is ready to rejoin society, then their rights should be fully restored. Because when the Second Amendment talks about the right of the people, those people include all free citizens. And last I checked, once you've been released, you are no longer in custody and are trusted to move freely, hold a job, pay taxes, and raise a family. But somehow you're not trusted enough to have certain rights back. because of the fear you might still be a danger to society. And I completely get that. Like I said earlier, my biggest hesitation when it came to restoring 2A rights to felons was based on that exact idea, that some may reoffend. And I'll be honest, this doesn't help my case because yes, there's been people who have been released then went on to commit some of the most horrific acts imaginable. Not gonna act like that hasn't happened. But here's where I believe the parole board and the institutions need to be held accountable, because what the fuck are you doing releasing violent criminals back on the streets? I'm sorry, if they haven't shown any signs of improvement while being incarcerated and there's doubts of whether or not it'll be safe to release them, then maybe they shouldn't. Look, at least in my head, it doesn't sound that complicated. If you murdered, raped, or kidnapped someone, or you're a pedophile, off with your head. I'm joking, not really, but seriously, if you want to take a soft approach, fine. Just don't let these people back on the streets. I definitely believe in drawing a line that once crossed, you can no longer be trusted in society again. Because some crimes didn't just happen by mistake. No, some people intended to do this shit. And no amount of time served should earn them a second chance outside of a cell. Now, there are those like we mentioned earlier who have committed nonviolent offenses when they were young and weren't out here trying to hurt anyone. For people like that, yeah, that time served should mean something. But this is where rehabilitation programs need to step up. Because if all we're doing is locking people, letting time pass, and then tossing them back into the same broken situation they came from, how do we expect any real change to happen? It doesn't for the most part. That's why, while they're locked up, these people need access to drug and alcohol treatments, anger management, mental health services, job training, and real guidance on how to re-enter back into society. And yeah, some won't take the help, but the ones who do, they deserve to rejoin society and have every single right that we as free citizens all have. So that's all I gotta say. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you're interested in seeing some CCW drills, make sure to check out my Instagram at ShadowTheWicked. Also, if you want to get in contact with me, that's a great place. But other than that, hope you guys have a good weekend. Stay safe and God bless.